Welcome everybody to this week's edition of A Psychic Affair, and I'm Dora, hostess with the mostess. Today we're going to be on a bit of a bender. I get into these little wee channels when it comes to time. Every year I have this little splurge on time. I have a bastard crisis of time, namely due to time zones, but what? And of course, there's this wonderful thing, years and years and years, that I go into these little wonders with time, and then quantum physics fantastically and gives us something to talk about with regards to that, which I think is pretty awesome. We've got this, amazing history in theory and quantum physics that is a little bit long. People sort of think about it. It became a popular thing probably in the mid to late 90s for the general populace, and especially for spiritual workers. And one of the most interesting things in the case of spirituality is like half-truths and a bit of this thrown out there, and it's just one of those things that I tend to think is, do the research, go find out, and then what you can do yourself. Find just blaming me for wanting chips and dips. I get up just because I'm a dip chip chick. Could have been a good day or any bad day. Be wrong. So it's looking at quantum physics, and we'll give you a little bit of a background because it does spirituality. For me, it is an ever-changing line between what we consider to be spirituality versus or complementary considered to be physics or physiology. For me, that line moved a very long time ago. Considered spirituality as well and truly in many cases being proven to. For example, as you all know, I see auras and I see and I can read the energy. I can see into the body on occasion, and when I'm things, there has to be an explanation. And I was on that, nearly 20 years ago. What's the explanation for me being able to see these things that doesn't involve me being a nutter? It involve a straitjacket and an asylum. And so as looking into this, there wasn't a lot of information that was freely available. There were things, and as the internet during the 90s became easier to gain information, it became clearer to me that there were ways that this could be done, and that these were in actual fact spiritual ideals, but physical realities. One of the things sort of starting in the aura reading side of it all, I was already clairvoyant doing that, but things that became pretty clear to me was that there was, at that time in New Zealand anyway, the attitude, if you weren't a medium, anything you down there somewhere was way down below. And the interesting thing for me was, well, when you're reading for somebody, when you give them information that's about their life, about the reality, that's qualifiable. I mean, it can be denied, it can be right, and it can be wrong. When it comes to mediumship, it's a very broad area. You don't have to have things sort of laying down on that. Aura was considered to be the soul, a representative of the soul. There were many people that were rocks and out there saying and teaching that this was the soul, and that it was like this around you that was sort of egg-shaped, protecting you. It was out there before your body in some way, shape, or form. So if you could see it, you were looking at. Well, I very quickly realized that wasn't right at all. And we move on from there. So the true pioneer really in quantum theory is it was actually a biologist of 1924, with quantum theory being just like a little glimmer of conversation for the scientists, forget everybody else. He proposed that the mind controls the brain by modulating the quantum jump that would otherwise lead to a completely random experience. Okay, are we mind-blown or what? Did you understand that? So basically, he hypothesized, isn't actual or proven to the extent that it is today, that the mind controls the brain, modulating the quantum jumps that would otherwise lead to a completely random experience. In other words, the mind or thought jumps around and feels forward. It feels matter. It feels quantum. Is faster than the speed of light, faster than you can function, faster than everything else. It and gives you a controlled at least partial, deliberately controlled experience of life. So that will become cohesive. Hiya, Wings. Hiya, Jenny. Welcome. Things become cohesive because your mind has the capacity to gauge on the quantum level, is what he was saying. 24, which is almost 100 years ago now. Spirituality didn't birth the idea that the mind manifests. In fact, science did that well before. The first detailed quantum model of consciousness, which probably the American Citizen Walker, he had this tunneling model, which I've got here, quantum tunneling picture. This is from 1970, and it knows I go on ad nauseum, nothing being new, that we get these so-called spiritual teachers, these books plant out, and they go, new discovery on Facebook websites, all this new discovery. And of course, they're already 50 years old. Now, I'm 57, which means they were in play when I was a wee child. In 1927, no, quantum theory was in play well before I was born by virtually 35, nearly 40 years. So there's a lot of interest in for me in understanding how we got to where we are today. That is right front. But the quantum tunneling, and as you can see the model there, I hope that I chose a diagram. I didn't create it that a clear understanding of it, because it's easier to look at. So in the tunneling model, which you've heard me talk around before, are you? Let me know why that is. And let's see what we can do there. I don't know if I can get rid of that and see if that makes any difference at all. Boom, 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 boom. I'm on my usual call and dial up, so that fixed it. And as I stop and start, it's good right now. I just shut down one thing, so maybe that was what was doing it, because I was in use just a little bit before. That's great. If it's better, I'm happy. Because you've asked enough without you missing bits. When somebody else is talking, you might miss a couple of words when I'm a whole blasted sentence, right? Tunneling is basically a way where electrons tunnel adjacent neurons. Now, important for the brain because neurons are firing, and they create a neural network overlapping the real one. So we've got a network, a real physical network going synapse and light and electricity and stuff. And then we've got one overlapping that, okay, which is all about the mind. It's not in actual fact real. And I can remember when I first learned about the aura, we talked about this blueprint, and it never quite gelled with me, this idea of this blueprint, that we were living this blueprint. But in actual fact, that the quantum tunneling says that actually there is this thing that's out there that's almost an experiment that's doing it first, and then the inside the body so that the brain does its job. So that is feeding information, in other words, and then the brain receives it. So it's like receiving the call, even like this sometimes, that the sound that you hear is a few seconds, if not a whole minute after. So it's an interesting thing. So in actual fact, what's happening on that level of your mind is happening a fraction in time ahead of it happening in your actual brain. And I do mean a fraction. It's so close. And is being quite often forward and touted as a reason for deja vu, that and then you're experiencing it in your brain. And now and again, the gap's just far enough. There's enough of a delay for it to feel like you've had it before and are experiencing it again. Very fascinating for deja vu lovers. Quite an interesting phenomenon. And I think if you're trying to see ahead or read ahead, it's probably more likely to work that way for you as well, because you become more, you're picking information up at that, which is outside of your physical brain, I suppose. As you're picking that information up, you're more conscious of picking it up there before it gets related through to your body, and then start sort of sending all these signals and firing. So it's consciousness that can direct the behavior of your real nervous system. It goes into all of those theories and all of those spiritual ideals that what we think is what we are, because basically we're message here and then feeding it back into the body. The nervous system then passes that all the body, and we live it as if it's a brand new or very real thing. The virtual one, by means of the quantum effect of tunneling, which is particles passing through an energy. Classically, they should not be able to pass through. So what I think we do when we are interacting with it's what scientists think we're doing too. It all perhaps empathy. It's how we sense, in other words, higher sensory perceptions, which not an extra sensory perception, but a part of your natural physiology way, just so as we're clear there. And that's what I mean about I keep especially quantum physics, quantum mechanics, moves that bar, spirituality further and further and further away by making it less and less and less tangible when physics is doing all of those things that were previously ascribed to spirituality, I suppose, best way I can put it. The real, driven by the classical laws, none of those have been proven to be wrong as such. The virtual one by quantum laws, which are, they are very fickle indeed. And they're quantum laws, and even if they're described by classical laws, it's governed by quantum law. Did we get all of that? Do we understand that? So in 2012, the U.S. National Medal of Science awarded to Yakov Anov, who is Russian, regarded one of the world's leading quantum theorists, and he published a paper in Nature Physics showing that the is constrained by the past, and which has been, by the way, repeated. So this means what happens in the present can depend on what happened in the future. Did you get that? Happened, not happens. So there's kind of like a happens kind of a thing going on there. And that's a really bizarre concept. So if you just allow that to settle for a minute, because initially your first thought is, that sounds rubble. But what we're learning about quantum physics is that the impossible happens at a pre-matter level, which does mean and have some incredible potential consequences for this part of our mind. So our mind power rather than our thought power. Does that make sense? There is a little bit of a difference there, two things. And I see that as a difference, but I know a lot of people interpret them as the same thing. Basically what it means is what happens in the present can depend on what happened in the future, which of course makes, as quantum physics really rarely does make sense. It also means that what happened in the past, right, can affect the, and therefore both of those things are affecting right today. So clearly the past, we're kind of aware of that. We kind of get this interference that it has in our present, but I think we quite significantly. Also, that means that we've got this thought that we cannot alter the past, we can't alter the past, but quantum physics is telling us now is altered by the future. Now that to me is phenomenal. Right up until hearing that a few years back with everybody else, there's actually a name for it, and it has been repeated. So I have to say it's not just one experience being repeated again and again and again around. And I've often mentioned the one where this is a few years back, of course, 2014, maybe 13. They took photons, and they took one to one place and one to the other place, and because they had been together, they could have been influenced them, which is what they definitely tried to do, but they couldn't. When they tried to influence one, the other one unraveled with it. Whatever they did to the first one, the second one would do it, and that was the groundbreaking work which became entanglement, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself too much here. The delayed choice quantum array is the model that we're actually talking about. Maybe that was what was interfering there. Oh no, a reminder to start my show. It would have been late. This is the weird. There's also tremendous implications for understanding the nature of our reality, because again, when you go back far enough, we've got all mail that says that there's no such thing as reality. I will argue that all the way to the bank quite happily. The bank's 40 k's away. So I'd argue that because there is reality. And so as soon as you start denying reality, you're in a little bit of trouble. It doesn't matter if you created it. It doesn't matter. Still a bit rough. I don't know if there's much you can do aside from calling back in. I'll try calling back in and we'll see how we go with that. 2 seconds, people. Okay, I'm back. Hope. Sorry about that. So is that better or is it the same? If it's yay. Okay, nice and speedy. Woohoo. So I do hope it's better. So with the delayed choice or quantum eraser theory, it's not a theory, sorry, they've proven it. Basically, you're looking at a shift, I suppose, sideways of what was known as the double slit experiment. Now, the double slit experiment showed us something very profound. It showed us that as they shot photons at these 2 slits in a wall, they should have gone through the 2 slits and gone bang, 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 and created 2 lines, which they did, as most of it. But they also found that there were certain times where it didn't work the way that they suggested it should. So this is where the time bit comes in, and it's quite a fascinating thing. Again, it's not new. You can look at that diagram and you'll see exactly what confused them. When they saw this, they were just mind-blown. When you mind-blow the scientist, life's great, right? So the delayed choice experiment or quantum eraser experiment is basically a modified version of this double slit experiment. So the delayed choice is about time and how it isn't quite what we think it is. In the experiment, tiny bits of matter, photons, electrons, or any atomic-sized objects are shot towards a screen that has 2 slits in it. On the other side of the screen, a high-tech video camera records where each photon lands. When scientists close one slit, the camera will show us an expected pattern. As seen in the video, no, not as seen in any video. I've got a link to a video so you can go and look at that. But when both slits are open, an interference pattern emerges. So they begin to act like waves. So we've got 2 slits. And when there's only one, they go boom, 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 and do what they're supposed to do. When they have 2, they expect it to go boom, 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 and have 2 rows. But they didn't get that. What they got was this half a dozen rows, which indicated the wave pattern as opposed to shooting straight through. So this confused them. So scientists decided to set up a camera behind the screen and have a look at how the actual photons were coming through the slits. What were they doing? And so what happened was they found that they quite simply changed their minds. They'd either go through both, they would go through none, or they'd go through one. So you ended up with this weird thing that they might go around. So you ended up with waves and particles. And what waves do is when you've got 2 waves is they cancel each other out, and then they hit the surface at the back on different points. That's all very interesting, and I know that you love to hear more about that, but I don't want to belabor that because it's not what we're talking about today. But what it does mean is that each photon individually goes through both slits at the same time, okay? At the end of the day, that's what they come out with. And the same photon that went through 2 slits at the same time interferes with itself, all right? Like getting in your own way. I hope we got that. So furthermore, it means, are you ready? And it goes through neither of them. This is quantum physics at its best. It goes through neither of them. The single piece of matter becomes a wave of, wait for it, potentials, expressing itself in the form of multiple possibilities. So all of these possibilities are there in the way it can manifest, but it hasn't quite decided yet, and that's why they get the interference pattern. Once they put the camera behind and they start looking at it and trying to measure it or observe it, the behavior of it changed. So when they aimed the camera at one slit, everything went through one slit. In other words, everything changed. So when an observer decides to measure and look at which slit the piece of matter goes through, the wave of potential path collapses into a single path. Now, hear that, it collapses into a single path. In other words, by putting our focus on it, by looking at it the way that we do, by observing it, by having an intention, we have collapsed all other possibilities. Woohoo! We've just lassoed that photon and made it go through that single path because that's what we are looking for, literally what we are looking for. So it does what we expect does what we intend. It does what we're observing. The rest of it just doesn't care. It's only pleasing the observer, which is kind of interesting. Then as soon as you stop looking at it, the wave of potentials in one particle comes back again. It starts interfering with itself. So the observer has an effect, and that's when the intention experiment was born. I'm pretty sure this was 2012. The intention experiment was born, and it became this huge phenomenon where they had to go and re-look at all of the studies they'd done in other areas, because they became aware that the reason some studies, it was impossible to get two matching studies, which was causing arguments throughout the scientific world. When the first one was done really well and the second one was done really well, it should have worked or whatever. They realized that actually if the second one had a different intention, they could change the result. Are we starting to see how this could work for us now? According to the quantum mechanic laws that govern subatomic affairs, which is what I'm working with, by the way, when I'm doing energy therapy, that's what I'm working with. You're working with subatomic particles every time I went out on some level to change how molecular behavior exerts and expresses itself in the body, basically, pretty much. That's how it's going. And that's how it will always go. So the electron to exist, so a particle like an electron exists in a murky state of possibility, basically. You know, it's all very grey. It can do just about anything. To be anywhere, everywhere, and nowhere all at the same time, until clicked into substantiality, that means reality, matter, it matters or it doesn't matter. Oh, my favorite thing to look at, it matters. It's not just a few words. It's not just that matters or that doesn't matter. It means that is matter. It can manifest, it can become matter, or it can't. This is our paying attention to or ignoring. It's fascinating stuff. Just that whole idea that simply by an eyeball or a detector or a camera, we change an actual path of quantum matter particles, which in turn, before they get absorbed into larger molecules, and then they get run along on the course of that, providing the energy for it, this little burst of energy, which is what they're doing. We are literally creating that. So this is buying into a whole lot of spiritual talk, which does say, you know, we manifest, we can create, but we still are of the mind that we only do that with a one-way ticket, right? We only do it by going forward. Everything goes one way. Personally, I would suggest that, you know, it means that too, like DNA, genetic sequencing, it was all once thought to be very static, and then it was proved to be actually ongoing evolution, ongoing change, ongoing everything. Everything can change in a minute. That means you can heal spontaneously just as easy as you can get sick. We see that as things are a one-way dimension in our mind, forget the third dimension, damn it, we can't even work out our time dimension, our time frames. But if you think about that, there's no logical sense in getting sick. There's just none. If you start off healthy, what is it that creates that? And if we do get sick, why is it that we don't beat it off with a stick with ease? And that's because we have this singular attitude, this singular belief that time moves in one direction only. And if you can sustain that for a minute, which is what we do with hypnosis, right? We play around with time, put you in some space. We get you to go up and see things as perfectly good. We get you to drop back and, oh, we'll forget that bit over there and we'll twist this one around a little bit. We're actually treating your whole mind like modeling clay when we're practicing hypnosis. And so that outer layer, that mind bit, that bit that we're talking to, becomes the bit that is saying, oh, we can do exactly what we want. We can be exactly what we want. It's not just a matter of belief. It's a matter of instruction. So once that instruction starts being relayed back to the body, things can change in the body. Now, as the instruction is always external, that's where your belief, that's where your envisioning skills, all of that comes into it. We're very aware of that without necessarily taking it fully on board and into ourselves. Welcome, Jim. Great to see you. So when we start looking at this kind of thing, it becomes a really huge, big deal, like a really huge, big deal. A well-known physicist, his name is Andrew Truscott, actually said, reality does not exist unless we are looking at it. And that's what started this whole your life is an illusion stuff. But I think that's kind of dangerous talk in itself, because it weighs the power away from yourself as to what happens for you. In other words, it becomes a very narcissistic or sociopathic energy that nothing matters because nothing's real. Like the intention experiment. So when we have got our focus, then we increase the potential of all matter to take a particular form in a particular way. And because we've got that and we've got entanglement, now put these two things together, there is no way that the photon you're emitting, are you ready, those photons again, from your body isn't already interacting with something, an equal energy or whatever in the future. Whoa, pretty fascinating stuff. Like the intention experiment really showed scientists that an agenda can influence outcomes in any study. We're the same. Our agenda, our belief, our expectation can influence outcomes in any life that we've got going forward. And that's not just from today, because we project that into the future, and that future is already experiencing its influences, et cetera, et cetera. So it's almost like we're behind it all, choosing which path we will take, and we narrow that down by our own intention. But we can go further. With progressive hypnotherapy, we are working in the future to create a change in the present. What I never really understood until I read these experiments was that it also physically changes the past, and we can explain that in a little while. We believe there's a single direction in time, basically because we see that. We see people getting older, but we never see them getting younger, right? We see a cup fall on the floor and, God forbid, spill the coffee, but we never see it putting itself back together, because it would still be in our minds, probably even then we would see it as a forward motion rather than a change in the past. So essentially what we're saying is, if you apply the principle correctly, the coffee drops. Don't tell Tom I broke his coffee and spilt it. The coffee cup gets dropped, the coffee gets spilled. Now, instead of it actually being a forward motion that it repairs itself and keeps going, what you're looking at there is it's actually a backward motion, and it never happened. Are you with me still? So it never happened. So it changes the past, which changes the present. Are we good with that? Now Tom will be happy, right? Because it just never happened. Never, ever happened. So when there's a link to the double slit experiment, or there isn't, did that turn out to be a link or not? No? Why not? Why not? Copy. Let's try that again. You can go and have a look at that. No? Bugger it. That's all I got. Let's try that. Da-da-da-da-da. No. Oopsie. Okay. Well, it looks like a link, but it's just not copying it through. So we'll get over that. And moving right along. Where am I now? That's right. So we've got the cups. So we've got that. It breaks, the coffee goes everywhere, but it's not like a movie going backwards. So that's the bit to understand. It's not like a movie going backwards necessarily, but it is about time going backwards. And therefore it changes what happened before the coffee cup got dropped, as if it never happened. When I do DNA work, when I'm doing my DNA reprogramming programs, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking at taking out experiences, whether you remember them or not, teaching, training, that are not in line with you being the most productive, or not in line with you meeting your potential. And although I've been doing that for years, I had been doing it for a while before I understood how it actually worked. So all of this information is relevant to your concept of time, just as that double slit experiment illustrates how factors associated with consciousness collapse the quantum wave function, a piece of matter existing in multiple potential states, into a single piece of matter with defined physical properties. Therefore, it's no longer a wave, right? All of those potential states have collapsed into one. That's what we do with our lives. That's what we do when we project energy forward, with whether it's an expectation or a belief is irrelevant. The thing is that when we talk about being open and being open to potential, that's far more important than we actually thought. And are we really open to potential, or are we open to different ways of achieving the same potential in general? In our minds, what are we doing right there? For most people, I would say that they're only open to a a single potential, but they may be open to a number of ways of getting there. Getting a person to sort of change their mind, let something go. We've all watched that, right? Releasing things, letting it go can be such a challenge, but that's a challenge that describes the actual determination, I suppose, or the focus, or the depth of focus, or the commitment of focus, not the person, but the focus to this single potential, to this singular outcome, the singular flow in life, which we may have developed when we were 3. Okay, 3 as in singular, 3 years old, an expectation or whatever that might be. We may not even have it defined in our consciousness, which means how can we undefine it? How can we broaden it to live a potential when we're not even realizing that we've collapsed all of the other potentials around it? So there's really only one way to take that forward, and there's only one way to think about that, really. Now, if you're thinking about cause and effect can be reversed, and the future can cause the past, you're starting to have some concept of how mind-bending it is. And the more attention you pay to that, the more your mind starts to go, so really, if I can think of that being up there, rather than thinking I've had a broken ankle and I've fixed it, or a broken wrist, or whatever injuries we've got, if I can look up there as if I never had it, I can actually change any impact it's had on my body through the past. There's a thought, right? And that's a potential thought. Now, as soon as you think, no, I can't do that, or that's silly, then you kill that potential. You've collapsed everything back into the singular part. That makes some sense. Physicists at the Australian National University, ANU, for anybody who wants to go and have a look at their papers, have conducted John Wheeler's delayed choice thought experiment, and that goes back quite a long way. The findings were recently published in the Journal of Nature Physics. In 2007, scientists in France shot photons into an apparatus and showed that their actions could retroactively change something which had already happened. What Asher Perez said, who was the French scientist, if we attempt to attribute an object meaning to quantum state of a single system that includes your body, curious paradoxes appear. Quantum effects mimic not only instantaneous action at a distance, there's your entanglement and your non-location, which I've mentioned before, I'm sure, but also, as seen in this experiment, the influence of future actions on past events, even after these events have been irrevocably recorded. In other words, they've recorded the event, and then when they've gone back to look at it, they've said, but you couldn't have got here if that happened. Couldn't have happened. It's impossible. Or they've gone back through their recording of it to see that something in the past had changed. The actual aging of something, the actual position of something was not where it was meant to be. But it was recorded. Oh, it's like, whoa. So we're not even going to try and get our heads around that. We're just going to expand ourselves and allow it to percolate. That's how I like to do things. For many years, I have really used photonic emissions of stars to explain seeing the aura and light, and how you can read somebody on the other side of the world, and how you can do it through a computer, and how you can do it without seeing them. And I've been asked so many times over the years these questions, although less in the last few years, that I've always used the stars, that, there's a star out there, it's 1 billion years old. In fact, it died, out of its billion years, it might have died 500 million years ago. And we see its light. And its light goes on infinitely. It never stops. It never dims. It's the same. Yours are the same as well. So you can see the light of a person who lived long ago on this planet, a tree, anything that emitted light at any time will continue to have that light moving. Now, that light is moving through time. So its point of origin, while it might be a million light years away or whatever, must still get further away, one would assume, than where it started. So if it took a 500 million years to get here, it'll be 500 million years before it's even looking at getting past us and not existing in our realm. But way down the track, somewhere a few million light years behind us, somebody may have just started seeing it and go, oh, there's a new planet in the sky, there's a new star, there's a new comet, there's a new whatever it is. And they're looking at it maybe 500 million years after us. So that's the light is time kind of idea, which is after, that's a photon. But of course, then they find that photons aren't behaving that way. They're not behaving that way at all. That this photon is still connected to a photon. So the photon right at the beginning of this story is the same, is still involved and entangled with the photon that's reached the Earth, reached our eyes, if you like. So we get information from that. By looking at that photon, those photons or that light, a scientist, an astronomer, can tell you the size of that star or how old it was, how big it was, what its trajectory was, even basically what its shape was. Even if it was actually influenced by other shapes around it, they can tell you all of that without any capability of seeing the original star, only by seeing the light that projects from it. And so that's what basically aura reading's all about as well, reading energy, all that sort of stuff. So we've got that light that's shining infinitely from time that you never even existed in, which can allow you to read a person who died thousands of years ago, even though they had nothing to do with you. You could sense them, you could feel them, you could see them. So it's a very interesting energy, to say the least. I'm not necessarily talking about recent history either. You can go back as far as you like. The expression of photons is something that is intrinsic to every living being as far as we know. John Wheeler began his exploration in the 70s, and he asks us to imagine, and this is why I mentioned that bit, because then when I read that he'd asked this, I thought, oh, how interesting, only he's a bit more advanced than me. He says, imagine a star emitting a photon billions of years ago, heading in the direction of the planet Earth. In between, there is a galaxy, and as a result, what's known as gravitational lensing, somebody did say coffee, whoops, gravitational lensing, the light will have to bend around the galaxy, are you watching that, around the galaxy in order to reach the Earth. And so it has to take one of two paths. It has to go left or it has to go right, okay? Billions of years later, if one decides to set up an apparatus to catch the photon, which we do now, the resulting pattern would be, as explained in the double slit experiment, an interference pattern. This demonstrates that the photon took one way and it took the other way. One could also choose to peek at the incoming photon, setting up a telescope on each side of the galaxy to determine which side the photon took to reach Earth. The very act of measuring or watching which way that photon comes will mean that it comes in from one side, which can only then be changing the past. The pattern will no longer be an interference pattern representing multiple possibilities, but a single clump pattern shown one way. So if you look at it one way, it doesn't matter if it went around both ways. It will present itself as coming one way only. Quantum entanglement, which has also been proven, already shown it exists regardless of time and space. So quantum entanglement means, regardless of time and space, that two photons that have ever had anything to do with each other are still attached to each other. They still know what's going on. So once your body breaks down and disappears into the little photons are still floating about, and they are still entangled. They're still entangled. Your particles, all of these things. So when they become generated, perhaps in another body or another thing, there's a common knowledge. And we could call that the universal knowledge, you could call it the ether, you could call it anything you like. But that's where it all starts to form a cohesive, if you like, cohesive area for us all, where we can understand, that things are moving in a slightly different way to what we thought they would. When it comes to thinking about your future and when it comes to manifesting something in your future, you need to start looking at not what you want so much, okay? And this is probably the most important thing I get out of this. If all of matter, and we're talking physical manifestation here, right? We're not talking about working hard to get a good life and to make a buck as such, although money is a real manifestation. So how do you manifest something like money? Now, you're not manifesting it out of thin air, but it is made out of a lot of little particles, and then they become part of something else, and they are put together cohesively in a physical way. So if you see yourself, for example, with a pocket full of money, a pocket full, like $2. It's a pocket full. No. If you see yourself with a pocket full of money in the future somewhere and you determine a time frame for that, you have now collapsed all other potentials into that one potential. There is no potential for you to get it any other way. Just the same as with vision boards, and I mentioned in the past being disturbed about women that have come forward and they've made their vision boards with the lotto or winning something in the middle of it. They've collapsed all other ways and potentials that they could get what they want. As soon as you have an envisioning experience, now this is important for us who like to envision our future, and it matters to envision, by the way, so we're not saying don't do that. But as soon as you've envisioned it in a particular way, your instructions will only take you there. They won't take you in any other way, collapsed. So instead of having 5 potentials, you now have 1. You only have one way to get there based on what you know, who you are, what you believe, what your skills and abilities are, what you think you can learn, what you know you can't learn, what you think you can do, and so on and so on. So we all have these things. The reason we have more freedom now is because we're not quite as tied in to those potentials, or not really, those life goals, those singular directional ideas. But what if we thought about it a little bit differently? Instead of thinking, I'm going to manifest this for myself up there, I'm going to focus on it, pockets full of money, bank going up, 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 all of that stuff. I'm saying money because it's the easiest and it's not emotional, really. You envision all of that, but you don't envision how you get it. Okay, so now we wipe out all of that past. Now we go to the past bit. Now, in the past, you might have made a few mistakes, and something in you now has determined that, because of those mistakes, you're not where you would like to be, right? So straight away, you've got the past affecting the present, and then what you're envisioning for your future, even if you deliberately do a 10-minute envisioning with a pocket full of money, which one's going to have the most influence? And, of course, it's going to be the past at this stage. So how do you put the future emphasis to work it going the other way? How do you take the future and then envision it in such a way that it changes or cancels out the past? How do you change karma itself, the cause and effect? Now, if you understand cause and effect, that there is an action and there's an equal and opposite reaction, that's the true bit of cause and effect. But there's not a real rule around that we thought there was, because when we look at these subatomic particles, when we look at physical manifestation of light, thought, how it works into our body, and it works back into our body rather than out of our body, then it becomes clear that we could potentially, if we did this correctly, allow ourselves to focus on the ultimate outcome, without any how I got there ideas. I don't have to necessarily work my little ass off. I don't necessarily have to get married to get it. I don't necessarily have to travel. I don't necessarily have to do this or that or this job or write that book. I don't necessarily have to do any of that. All I may need to do is envision being inspired in such a way that anything is possible within the realms of the things that I like. Right? It's one of those interesting areas. Now, once I'm envisioning that anything is possible in the realm of anything that I like, that every potential is valid, and then I allow that light energy to work its way back, and it works its way back, and it doesn't matter what I did in the past or didn't do, what mistakes I made, what I should have done, even if that was yesterday, even if it was 10 minutes ago, none of that matters. What if there really was no consequence because I can change it in the future and therefore I can change the origin? Now you can say, but you recorded this. There's proof that this happened. But the thing is that proof that it happened doesn't mean anything because it's no longer real. Okay? Let's get that down pat, shall we? We act as if the past is real and the future isn't. We act as if what happens in 5 minutes isn't really real right now because I can't control it, I can't see it, whatever. It hasn't happened right now. And we're taught that. Even spiritualists teach you that. Just focus on the now. Focus on right now. Maybe they're not right. So maybe the now and the future are entangled. Maybe they are so entangled that any now includes the future. And that by not going to the future, you may be doing yourself a disservice by not being progressive and walking into that moment and allowing the best possible life, the best possible emotional state, the best possible physiology and health, well-being, all of that stuff, allowing that to be in the future and then allowing that energy to work its way back through you. Forget that past. It alters the past because now you haven't got a progressive situation that goes from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday, regardless of what you might like to think that's what we believe. Now what you've got is it's not going that way at all. It's going Thursday to Wednesday to Tuesday to Monday. And it doesn't matter if Monday is behind you because it's cancelling out that cause and effect transition. If we really want to buy into the idea that everything is about what we believe, if we really want to buy into that, then why would we bother believing in cause and effect, really? Why would we bother? Because quite often we do see in actual fact that a person goes out and does something pretty bad and pretty awful and all the rest of it, and then nobody else catches them. They don't get into trouble. They get away with that. And we all go, well, you'll get yours later. But why will they get theirs later? What is it in us that feel a need for them to be punished? Or what is it that's in us that's so determined to have this cause and effect? Well, we have been taught it, right? We've been taught, you do that, you'll get into trouble. So it's quite an interesting thought, or it's a paradox, I suppose, when you start to really move out and start thinking more quantum enlightenment, and allow the fact that time isn't what we think it is, that it doesn't move in the way we think it is. Light does, but photons don't necessarily. There's a point where things behave oddly. What we see as a whole is only because we're looking at it that it behaves that way. So now we come back and go, what if we're not looking at consequence? What if we're not always looking at consequence? Firstly, I don't think that will make us all bad people. And I think that's probably the crux of it right there, isn't it? That we think that by having a consequence, and we're taught that as well, by having a consequence, it will keep us on the straight and narrow, but actually it's being compassionate that will keep us on the straight and narrow. It's being caring that will keep us on the straight and narrow. It isn't the word consequence. There are people that have gone out and say they've had an affair, and they've come home and then they've thought about it and they've felt absolutely awful and sworn they will never do that again. They've never told their partners and they've never done it again. So they're not a bad person, but they've made a mistake, acknowledged it, and blah, blah, blah. They didn't have to blurt it out to their partner to make themselves feel better. They didn't need to put that onus of that onto other people because they felt a need of punishment or some kind of consequence. So it's a fascinating aspect to start looking into that future and seeing it as causal, not consequence. Okay? Did we get that? You know, if you've got entanglement existing regardless of time and space, then you've got something very interesting indeed. In fact, space is just a construct that gives the illusion that there are separate or separation of objects. You know, I can remember when I first read, I can't even remember how many years ago, of them, Deepak Chopra wrote about this. They got, once they could make microscopes big enough, they have a microscope as big as a house, basically, to look at the tiniest thing. And they put the human hand under this microscope, and they realized that there was more space than matter. That, in actual fact, the ratio of space to matter was a phenomenon that they didn't quite understand because nothing was held together by apparently anything. So there's an attraction. So we get into this law of attraction, and things move on and move on. And while we try to apply it to our day-to-day lives, I can't help but wonder if we aren't just restricting ourselves, that we're only attracted to or attracted by or attracting the thing we're focused on. I say that all the time. The law of attraction is about focus. If you focus on it, you'll notice it. If you notice it, it may notice you. Or it will notice you. When I say it, I should probably say him, her, or otherwise, or a situation or a job. But until you start focusing on it, it doesn't really matter. Here we go back to that matter. And when you start focusing on it, suddenly it matters. So perhaps we could broaden our minds, perhaps we could broaden our idea to move away from the idea of intention per se, and move into the whole, if I can feel up there and there's a consequence, or if there's something going on up there that's probably not going to be too good, I can change it up there and it will modify me back here because now I'm in the past. So does that make sense? So essentially I am in the past for where I'm going to be. Yeah? Does that work? Does that work? Yes, it does work. Pioneering physicist Sir James Jeans wrote, Jeans, the stream of knowledge is heading toward a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. And you know, medicine and science has been moving this way for quite some time. They've been acknowledging, they've been bringing in the mind-body, but there's still a but. but not as holistically. Even holistic medicine doesn't do it. Everybody sort of eschews everybody else. Don't do that. Don't go to that doctor. Don't do this radiation. Don't do all of these things. We set consequences. We predetermine what a consequence may be instead of looking at potential. So that means that we're focused on outcome still, we're focused on the end story, we're focused on the paragraph and the last chapter and the last line. We're not actually focused on the next or the sequel. We're not focused on the potential. We say it, but we're not really. So if you can start practicing focusing on potential, then as you see things, instead of denying them and going, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to be this. I had this really depressing conversation with a man here a couple of weeks ago. He cornered me out there somewhere, and he's like, I've started this new job at a bee place, and he's making beehives. And I said, oh, well, that's nice because you were looking for a job. And he's like, yeah, but I hate it. And I said, oh, that's a shame. Then he goes, there's this thing where you can go and it's a lifestyle thing where you can go and live on a farm, and you can live there and you can do a bit of work, and they'll board you, and you stay there for a while, but you're not doing it for money. You're not doing it for wages. And I said, well, why don't you sign on with them? He named a particular group, and he says, oh, no, I don't want to do it through them. And then he's talking about the money wasn't very good. And anyway, we went through this little chain. I've done this with people before so many times. This little chain of conversation where at the end of the day, all I'm really hearing is no, 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 no. And it's like this ridiculously closed down idea where you put your own idea forward, right? This is what he did. This is what I'd like to do. And then as soon as I'm like, yeah, that would be a good idea and you could do it this way. No, well, I don't really want to do that. So as soon as you're starting to look at these no's, left, right, and center, with an idea that's actually yours, not somebody else's, then it's time to ask yourself a question or two. What is it that you're actually thinking? Because what you're thinking will drive and pile drive you down into the ground. Now, this guy has had a number of misfortunes, and he's been backpedaling all the way. And I know he's grumpy about that, but at the same time, there's a point where you need to stop the backpedal, so he's creating in his life everything that he dislikes. When I first came back to New Zealand the first time, when I'd been in Australia for 8 years, I was not a happy girl. I'd had this horrible relationship. I'd finally come out of it, but I was still not a happy girl. And I noticed the first thing is I took this little house to rent. I didn't like the house. I didn't like the property. I didn't like the way it was set up. It wasn't actually expensive, but there were plenty of other cheap places around that I could have taken on. And I just knew that I had chosen a place that reflected my displeasure. And I would not have had it. I wasn't even capable of choosing something that I would like at that time. And so we put ourselves in this position. And I did stay there for 9 months, and then I did get happier, and then I went and found a place that I really loved. It really works that way. Now, I didn't consciously go looking into the future for stuff, but when you look at happy, successful people, it's really noticeable that they kind of do that without even thinking. We talk about, I think, and I know. And when a person is going, I just know this will work out, that's when they're in their drive mode, right? When they say, I see this working out, now they're in their slightly hopeful mode. They're not necessarily looking at the future and working it back to their present. So if your future's successful, happy, bright, and all those things, and the potential is there, and you allow it to work its way back, you actually provide for yourself a path forward that will get you into that position. But as soon as you're in that position, you've still got another future, and you've still got another future, and so on and so on. Because this is a moment-by-moment configuration, it isn't a 10-year block. So I find that quite fascinating. I also find it fascinating to know that if you've got something wrong in your body, you can undo it. In energy therapy speak, we've done this. I've done this with clients before today, and we've undone things. And the client has actually said, say the pain changes in a particular way, and they say, oh, you know what, when it started, I used to get this. This is what it was like when it first started. So it's actually literally physically undoing and putting yourself back as if that problem had never existed, rather than we're healing something that exists and going forward with some damage in play or something not quite right, which I see in the aura. If I see it in the aura, I just go, yeah, it's not quite right. If I don't see it, I know it's gone. It's out of there. If you think of the universe as a thought, like a huge thought, Mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather sort of to hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter. So we again, in spiritual terms, kind of talk about this, but I think that it falls well short of living it, talking about it or living it. Now, if we are the governor of the realm of matter, then all we need to do is sort of accept what is an inarguable conclusion, which is the universe is immaterial, mental, and spiritual. That means that the whole universe is not of material, makeup. It's not made of something. It's developed from something. It's quite noticeable to think about how we've looked at astronomy. You know, we started out, we could see the Milky Way because you can see that with your naked eye. Then we moved on and we could see the next group of galaxies, and we could see further and further with the assistance of things. Everything we've ever created has been to fulfill a vision, which is actually in the future, right? And it works backwards, that we created to match something we've envisioned in the future. We don't create it and just hope it'll turn out all right. Now, the more we open up to letting the future of the success of that dictate how we go about it, the more efficiently we'll do it, the easier we'll do it, more painlessly we'll do it. A whole pile of factors in there that can only be good. So we already know that consciousness moves outside of time and space constraints, and we can remember something from the past, although we can see something in the future, simply because someone is thinking it, imagining it, or creating it, even if it's not you. You know, over the years, I've often been curious about, especially you go back where papers were slow, there was no internet, how people went into different countries inventing the same thing at the same time in different places and spaces. There's your entanglement right there, right then. Now, we're pretty much at the end of the show today. So next week on A Psychic Affair next week, we are looking at, I want to do a food psychometry show, just a bit of fun. So between now and then, I'll need you to post me those pictures. You can post them on the IntuiTalks Facebook page if you're not sure where else, and just tag me. That would be really good. And then, of course, this week, this Sunday night at 10 p.m. on my new show, my new series, Voices from the Past, we're going to look at the Book of Giants. Whoa, where people lived for 395 years and they were 20 feet tall. We're going to be looking at the Book of Giants. It's such a powerful, it's like got such a tiny little, it's almost like, you know, something so important gets this tiny wee one single line up in the headlines. You know, when you look at it, and they're big headlines about Posh Bex and her hubby in his knickers, and then off to the side they talk about some big apocalyptic event, and it's like, how do those two get sort of battered off each other? So we're looking at the Book of Giants then. Now, don't forget, you will need to photograph or find a photograph online, that's fine, of what turns you on as food, what seems attractive to you, what you think you'd like to know between now and next Wednesday, preferably by Tuesday would be really great, for our show next week. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and remember this week, don't be a part of your own problem. Ciao for now.